Hi, and welcome back to the Low Will Learning Company. And today we're going to be looking at the novel The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. Now, many people think of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as like a little children's fantasy book, and it is. But C.S. Lewis does some really really good thematic storytelling and putting the characters into unique situations that really emphasize important lessons from the stories, but especially the one regarding Edmund. The part of the story involving Edmund and the part where he gives in to his temptations and how he becomes essentially a prisoner to it is one of the most realistic depictions of the downsides of temptation told in children's literature. So, in case you've never read The Lion, the Witch, or the Wardrobe, or if you've never read any of the Narnia series by C.S. Lewis, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe essentially is centered around these four siblings during World War II. And one of them basically discovers that their wardrobe is basically a gateway into a magical place called Narnia, which has its own issues of magical beasts which are being trapped by an evil witch, and it is them going into there while trying to help all the creatures involved in Narnia. That's a super simplified version of what the story is. There's more to it than that, but in case you've never read it before, that's the basic setup of the story. One of the four siblings, there's two brothers and two sisters. One of the younger brothers is named Edmund, and he goes in there after hearing one of his sisters had gone in and met these magical creatures. And instead of meeting these magical creatures, he actually ends up meeting the White Witch. And the White Witch tempts him with a treat called Turkish Delight. And if you've never had Turkish Delight, honestly, I think it's actually quite good, but it's really simple. It's just like basically a sugar candy that's kind of it's chewable essentially. You put a little bit of powdered sugar on it, and they're flavored in certain ways. And so she tempts him with basically this Turkish Delight. And what ends up happening next is Edmund gives in to his temptation, his desire for essentially sweets, for candy, for sugar. And after he's eaten it, and it doesn't really satisfy him in any way, I guess that could also be a parallel to just candy in general in our lives, but he wants more. It didn't really satisfy his craving for it or his desire for it. He wants more. And it essentially kind of leads him into giving away information about his own family, his own siblings. Like it overpowers him that much where he kind of loses focus of like what really matters most. And then essentially it leads him to be a prisoner for the White Witch in a sense that even once he's given away this information, to the White Witch, he's no longer useful at all. So now he's just a prisoner to her. And like I said earlier, it's a really important, I think, and realistic depiction of the downsides of temptation to children, especially the way it's told in this particular children's literature book. I think one other thing that's really, really smart in the way C.S. Lewis writes the scene in the novel is that the White Witch always has the trap ready for Edmund. He never realizes it. She didn't stumble upon it all of a sudden, in the sense that she knows that after he has the Turkish Delight, it will not satisfy him in any way. You know, it's candy. It's basically just like water and sugar. There's nothing meaningful behind it. And that once he has it, it still will never be enough for him. He's going to crave and desire more. And that's where she lays the trap for him. It's after he has the Turkish Delight. And that trap, by the way, it's what it does to Edmund himself. He begins to lie. He begins to almost bargain his sisters and his brother and his family to the White Witch. He begins to see himself as being more important, more entitled in a sense. And it really begins to warp him as a person. All the virtuous things almost begin to leave him, and all the not as well, not as virtuous, but the lesser parts of being human start to emerge from him, from these desires and desire to want more, to fulfill something that, quite frankly, cannot really be fulfilled within him. After all this, the real downfall are the many steps that Edmund takes through this process. First, he just wants his desire for the Turkish Delight, but that leads to indulgence, where he just wants more and more and more, and it won't ever lead to any satisfaction. That indulgence then leads to rationalization. Well, I can bargain my brothers and sisters for this. I'm better than them anyway. I deserve this more anyway. It warps his view of the world suddenly. Then that realization leads to dependence. In order to get more of this Turkish delight, he has to give it to this white witch. He has to kind of give in to her demands, give in to what she expects. Finally, that dependence is what ultimately leads to his loss of freedom when he becomes a prisoner to the White Witch. And again, for the White Witch, this is what she expected. Once he's no longer useful, once he gives away the information about his siblings, to her, he now means nothing. And that's why, hence, she just takes him as a prisoner. Hence, that loss of freedom. It's not just that a person jumps into a situation and they lose all freedom at all. It usually starts with something small. And in this case, for him, it's this unchecked appetite for something, this desire for something. It's a book saying that it's better to live a life of slight detachment, to not be so desiring of something that it warps your view of reality, that you compromise your morals, that you start to rationalize different situations that like, oh, this is why I deserve this. And that just, it slowly eats away at you. In that trap, Edmund believes that the witch will reward him, not only just with more Turkish delight, but then with power, with that he'll be a special person, he'll have importance in the world, and that's why he begins to see himself as better than his own siblings. And again, something that leads to his downfall. Why does this matter for kids who are reading literature? We could just look at Edmund and go, well, he gave into his desires. He gave into this idea of more power, being special, being elevated. But in the same way, it's for kids today. It's having more screen time with your tablet or your phone. It's about having more time on social media to post things, to look at the posts of all your friends or celebrities that you follow. It's about living a life giving in to your impulses. Whenever you want something, you just do it in that moment. There's no delayed gratification. Essentially, it's living a life of short-term pleasure, getting whatever you want in an instant. And that leads to a very dangerous life. In a sense, you become prisoner to your own desires of screen time, video games, social media. Really, another way to look at it is freedom is not a life where you just give in to your pleasures, where you give in to your impulses. Really, freedom is a life where you do have the ability to say no. There's Jocko Willink, who is a former Navy SEAL, and he even says actually freedom is discipline, or he might say the other way around. He might say discipline is freedom. And that's really important for young people to understand. And The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a book that really, it's one of the themes of the book, but it illustrates it in a really clear, easy to read way. Not to ruin the whole book, but Edmund is eventually rescued. He is forgiven. He does become restored, but he did pay a price. He learned his lesson with a heavy, heavy cost. And for kids reading the book, they get to learn that cost just reading about Edmund's journey through the story. What's so great about the way C.S. Lewis writes this is that he shows that the most dangerous traps in life, they don't necessarily always appear dangerous at first. And that when you do lose your freedoms, it's not lost all at once. It's usually given away a little bit by a little bit by a little bit. So if you haven't done so already, go read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. If you have kids, I'd highly recommend you have them read it. Hope this was helpful. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.